I'm Victoria, and welcome to my talk about why fashion in most games sucks and why you should care. As far as I know, there haven't been any in-depth talks about fashion in GDC, so I'm trying to cram as much as I can in less than 30 minutes. So if you think I've skimmed over anything, please submit your own talks, do your own discussions, contribute other things. I would love to just see more people talk about fashion in games. And I would totally attend your GDC talk when you do it next year. So a little bit about me before we start. I'm Victoria. I'm the community developer at Kitfox Games. A little bit more about that later. I previously worked on a ton of other games, maybe fashion-related, maybe not fashion-related, things like Omen's Sight, Leap of Fate, the mobile app episode, and more. I have been drinking a disgusting amount of bubble tea. And I don't know why I put that in there. I just thought it'd be cool. And I'm also half of a game development culture comic called Peach Butt Comics, and that's on Twitter. You can also find me on Twitter at the VTran. All my shenanigans there. Yeah. So a little bit about Kitfox. Kitfox is a small independent studio in Montreal, Canada. We're a team of 8. We do a bunch of things, but our most well-known developed game that's out so far is called Moon Hunters. It's a personality test RPG. We're currently developing a game called Boyfriend Dungeon, which is a dating simulator dungeon crawler mashup. And we are, yes, it's beautiful. Please look it up. And we are also publishing 2 games, which is really exciting. We're publishing them to Steam. One is 6 Ages, which is the spiritual successor to King of Dragon Pass. And we're also publishing the legendary Dwarf Fortress to Steam, which is very exciting. But we're here to talk about fashion. And briefly, I wanted to talk about why I thought it was a worthy topic. Though obviously, if you are all here, you probably think so too. But when I was a teen, I was one of those really annoying kids that was determined not to be one of those girls. I thought makeup was dumb. I thought caring about your looks was dumb. Anyone who cared about their hair was dumb. You know, it was a bad time. We all judged teenage Victoria. Cool, okay, good, we're moving on. But secretly, hours were sunk into playing every single Roy World game, the My Scene games online, the Barbie games online, Doll Makers. What a time. Yes, thank you. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm not going to get into it. But I love dressed-up games. I love them so much, and I hid it because I thought it seemed like a weird, girly thing I shouldn't be caught doing, and it wasn't cool in my mind for the reasons that I feel a lot of people have told me about, which was there's a lot of games out there that are like, yeah, shooting and steel and esports and whatever. Okay, that didn't exist back then, but anyways. In reality, though, it was a way for me to frame my perception of myself and how I wanted to appear to the world and why. And I feel somewhere along the way, when these games were kind of popular, we lost them, like, all too soon. So right now, games have typically been stuck in 2 major ways of thinking about play: domination and force. What I think fashion does for games is that it breathes in the power of expression and aesthetics, how it explores a different type of play and how that affects players. So I want to quickly go through a few definitions just to clarify some things. I'm not here to necessarily talk about what good fashion is. I think that's not a really accurate description of fashion. But I want to talk more about how we've ignored it as a serious mechanic or information-rich piece of storytelling. And fashion isn't just clothes. This is clothes, and this is fashion. And fashion doesn't mean high fashion, right? Like, all of this technically counts as fashion. I'm not here to talk about what good fashion is, again. We're not all fashion designers, and I think that's okay. You don't need to be one. Okay, so now that I've got that out of the way, one question I got when I told people I was doing a talk about fashion was why? And I get it, but the reasons you should care about fashion is actually the reason it usually sucks. So Bill Cunningham, once a fashion columnist for the New York Times, said that fashion is the armor to survive the reality of everyday life. And I think that applies both online and offline. In a real-life context, fashion matters more than you think. Even if you think you don't care, they do have significance, right? Like skin-friendly. I would like all my clothes to be skin-friendly. I don't know what that means, but I want it to be. But I get it, caring about clothes can sometimes seem really superficial. Great games continue and do exist and become hits without runway looks, and that's fine. But I think we should consider new possibilities in games, and why limit ourselves when games are one of the most exciting mediums out there. All right, so before I get to my first point, pretend you're meeting this person for the first time. Bam. Yes. OK, so if you don't know who that is, which maybe I should have picked a less well-known character, what opinions have you formed from that brief meeting? Right? So it only takes about 2 seconds to form an opinion on a person or character, and you can get a lot of information from it. Age, sex, socioeconomic status, occupation, personality, and so on. It's the first impression, and to be honest, is usually flawed, but it's unavoidable, nevertheless. So for example, regardless if you knew this character or not, you can probably tell she's a doctor from the white coat. Except she isn't a doctor you're normally used to because her shoes are a little bit off. It's very stylish, but not really a doctor thing. The black dress, also kind of strange for a doctor. And of course, the accessories. So you're getting like a very rebellious vibe about her. And then this other character gives us a very different message. So she's probably a student, judging from the skirt, but the fact she's covered in tights and a turtleneck means she might be more conservative or obeys dress code, if there is one. So fashion can be seen as its own complex language. It's codified, it's meaningful, it's symbolic, with different contexts and moods. So the first reason we should care about it is that fashion really increases our understanding. Like, it can call back a certain era that you want to draw attention to, describe the setting it's in, make or break the lands that you've made. It can send different signals, deepen understanding of your world without having to rely on walls and walls and walls of text, which I honestly hate in games. And it can say, like, where's your character from? What happened in their past? If they've made it, what are they doing now? How do you denote a villain versus a hero? What if you use clothes as an indication of something meaningful, like a festival or a culture, or a beloved childhood shirt? How can you basically tell their story? Clothes are clues to tell your players how to feel about characters, so you need to maximize your 2 seconds. And when things go right, you create a world that is deeper and connects more with your player, basically. So when it goes wrong is when your fashion kind of lacks context. In other words, it's meaningless. To me, a lot of fashion in games falls under this. They don't bring anything to the games, and they don't make your character significant in design or feel. In other words, it's information-poor fashion. They're the kind of the moments that make you go, like, what happened here? Like in this next slide. I've practiced this talk for so long, and I still can't figure out what it is, right? So if you don't know, Rex here is a diver. It doesn't look like a diving outfit, right? Like, if I didn't tell you this, you can't get any sense of what this character is. So again, it's not even necessary that it's bad with its weird boots and shorts and whatever else there is, but it's that it doesn't tell you really anything about it. Same for Jill Valentine. So she's supposed to be a cop, and I know it's kind of an old game, but like she's the main character, but she doesn't look like one. She's not memorable in any way. And also, just as a personal thing, tube tops fall down, not fun. Not a good outfit for zombies. And then this is not the outfit you would expect post-apocalyptic. And I understand it's themed, but it doesn't, if I took this completely out of context and showed it to someone, it doesn't make any sense. Excuse this bad photo of my sim that I took. Couldn't find it anywhere else. But one of the things that really bothered me was in The Sims 3, which is supposed to emulate real life, I didn't find fashion outfits that worked with me, or like that I thought I would actually wear, which seems strange for a game, and again made it sort of pointless. And of course, I have to include something from Final Fantasy. Here, the princess is a particular pain point for me because her design could be good, but she's like wearing a pink plastic napkin, and it's like a blue belt from the 2000s, and it almost works for the character class she is and what world she's in, but it just kind of breaks you out of the world, and it's like you hate consistency. It's strange. But even if we ignore how bad fashion provides nothing in games that they are a part of, it also takes away from it. In fact, they might counteract the mood or feel of the game, providing a really jarring experience. Like, there's been numerous times where I've had boss fights, and I've been wearing a ridiculous costume, and it didn't give me that kind of like deep sense of like doom or like anticipation because I was wearing like, I don't know, a chef's outfit, but there was no pants. I don't know. Anyways. So my next point has to do with how game and fashion has real-world meaning, whether it's internal or external. Fashion is personal expression, and that expression has both individual and communal power. So here's a study from Quantric Foundry, who interviewed gamers about their primary gaming motivations. You'll see that for both women and non-binary people, fantasy plays a huge role in what games they choose to play. Fantasy here is defined as being someone or somewhere else, and I argue fashion plays a huge role in this. And FYI for men, fantasy is the 4th highest motivation. And this makes sense, right? You want to feel connected to the character you play, the role you're in, whatever you're doing. You want to be able to express who you are, or who you want to be, in a fantasy context, even if you're not playing yourself necessarily. Obviously, this applies to many different games. Like Halo Reach's customization was wonderful, where you could customize each piece of armor. And when people first saw a peek at Halo 5, they kind of hated it, or what I saw they hated it. It kind of looked like a plastic recoloring of various armor sets. And you want to feel powerful in these games, right? You want to feel like you're the best at shooting things, I suppose. And clothes capture that. It matters to any type of gamer. And personally, it has an effect on self-expression. For me, when I was too afraid to wear sexy outfits, I would kind of wear them in games to explore how they made me feel. Did I actually like this? Did I want to dress more cute? Did I like more masculine clothes, and did that make me feel more comfortable? It's a powerful feeling that fashion gives. And dressing up a character helps you aspire to something personally. They give you a mission and incentive to explore that feeling off-screen if you choose to. So the personal aspect of fashion can go terribly awry because it is so personal. Due to the cultural meaning, it's easy to mess it up sometimes, even more so because the industry doesn't talk about clothes much. So I don't necessarily think misuse of clothes comes from an ill-intentioned or harmful mindset, but if we're talking about why clothes matters, can't ignore it. Yeah. So, of course, I have to talk about sexualized fashion. I've come to actually have very complicated feelings about it by now, and I recommend reading Maddie Meyer's fantastic piece about the inexplicable sexiness of Ivy Valentine on Kotaku. As she writes, these outfits don't directly tell us anything about the characters wearing them. Sometimes they contradict the stories and personalities of the women in them. And this is true, and I'd love to see games move away from this. She does mention reclaiming sexiness for ourselves, though I find the problem with this is that it's hard to feel empowered when this is your option, or whatever else, right? It's clear when a male character gets a perfectly acceptable costume for the context they're in, while the female one is wearing the coverage equivalent of a Band-Aid, or a belt, I guess, in this case. To be clear, sexiness isn't inherently bad, but that doesn't mean it has to be used all the time, or that it has to be used at all, right? It doesn't mean a sexy outfit is the only way to show female empowerment. I'm glad you're liking these. It was a fun time looking them up. Okay, so that's kind of like the sexiness in terms of like self-expression. But another thing that can go wrong is that I need you to first imagine this world with me. So this is another way fashion can be misused. Imagine with me a new world for a second where Americans are only ever shown wearing cameo or the US flag in all forms of media. Fashion, TV, movies, games, you literally cannot do anything without seeing an American wearing the flag. And like, work through this with me. It sounds funny right now, but after years of depiction, how bored, how annoyed, how dumb would this eventually look? This is the simplest, most reductive way I can try to describe this and relate it to what I'm going to talk about. Clothes reflect culture and significance. Issues of cultural appropriation go far beyond the games industry and diversity, but that doesn't mean we can't make a difference. So get sensitivity readers, hire diverse people for your project. Video games can be fun and powerful. So I just really wanted to talk about this, just using clothes as a means to really introduce your players or your fans to something new, to something way beyond what we can normally do. I really think that this makes a difference, and I've seen a lot of things go wrong with it, and That's why I think a great example of using fashion for cultural understanding is the Geeky Bayou project. This artist, Karis Locke, has been reimagining Southeast Asian garment design for various movies and games. Her aim isn't to directly convert a character's clothing into local outfits, but to express their personality, their beliefs, and history using textiles, motifs, and silhouettes. She mentions that when the characters from existing sci-fi and fantasy titles are interpreted through garments from the other side of the world, issues of race and culture often emerge because the people creating them aren't from the culture. And these designs are not only fun, but they're a way to learn about the history behind traditional outfits, especially for Southeast Asia in this case, which is often forgotten about. In this way, again, clothes are significant. And it's still video games. You can still have fun. You can still credit people and have fun with it, and you're allowed to learn things from other people. All right, so moving on. Fashion is business and marketing. As a community manager, I'm always looking for something that can hook in players. Hooks for video games are basically how you capture a player's attention and get them to want to learn more about your game. And there's a lot of different kinds of things like art, music, description, but overall it's an emotional attachment, and fashion can do that. For example, I've never wanted to play League of Legends. Then I started seeing pictures of this all over my Twitter timeline, and that's how I found the Pop Stars music video. Unfortunately, I've heard the artist wasn't treated great, but at the time, I legitimately spent an hour researching lore, KDA, and sent it to all of my friends. And if you want to speak in business terms, synergy and stocks and profits and stuff, you can make lots of money on it, right? The strength you feel in video games makes you want to embody the heroes you see, whether that's online or offline. And fashion is one of the best ways to do that. And if we want to get more physical about it, Red Dead has a clothing line. There's that cool thing between Final Fantasy and Louis Vuitton. But not even that. There's the whole thing about, loot boxes and Overwatch's massive financial success with seasonal skins. I don't have time to get into the ethics of loot boxes, so we're going to move on from that. But it's good business, and it sucks because I feel like there's no fashion games or mechanics. There are so many different ways we have learned to shoot someone with various guns, and I'm confused as to why now fashion games are mainly hidden behind microtransactions for mobile games, which isn't to say they aren't fun, to be clear, but I'll talk about that later. Like, there's not even a fashion game section on Steam. I was trying to find some. Nothing comes up. I'm just saying this is a whole market out there that someone can get in on. Just gonna go into that. But even Googling AAA shooters nets a ton of results on Google. Fashion gets nothing. I was trying really hard to find some fashion games. And the ones that do show up are web-based, they're super old, or again, they're mobile. But if we're trying to talk about mobile fashion games and things that are done right, I do want to talk about Love, Nikki. So Love, Nikki has problems with its own depictions in certain respects, but in another respect, it's highly appealing and complex in its own way. Clothes can be obtained via story quests, drops, events, shops, and crafting, and you can actually evolve your clothes, which is the most satisfying feeling to me. And you can get into style battles that kind of pit you against other players or AI, and it's one of the most satisfying designs I've seen for fashion games, and I'd love to see that more. But where it really lacks in terms of fashion is AAA games. Sure, they're usually cosmetic, which I totally support, and it's totally fine, but that doesn't mean we're nearing a point where we can't do more with it, right? Integrating clothes as an actual mechanic could create a whole new world of gameplay. The Hitman series has been one of the nice exceptions to this, where Agent 47 can sneak across using different costumes. There's Yakuza Zero's minigame, featuring the hostess makeovers and stats. But my point with this is that fashion games has been seen as a more feminine interest, but I'd like to challenge that, much like how many people have said they're not interested in dating sims until Boyfriend Dungeon, that we could develop a fashion game that attracts tons of people and isn't hyper-focused on one gender. Bottom line, fashion is fun. And it's games, which is primarily fun, so they kind of just go together, and it's beautiful, and it's a marriage. So let's say you're just not stylistically minded, which is totally fine. I just wanted to recap kind of what we went over and also some things for improvement that I've seen other people do or that we've done. So this is a recap for what games can do, what fashion can do for games. The three main reasons we talked about fashion is that it's informative, it's expressive, and provides fun. Keeping these in mind as you design characters, work on customization choices, or mechanics will help you. Think about what style brings to the table or how you want the player to feel in your game. So for example, this was the original design for one of the main dateable weapons in Boyfriend Dungeon. Looking at this, what are his personality traits based on the clothes he wears? And once you kind of figure that out, this is his redesign. It's a very different feel, even just from this, right? So to kind of describe it, his original character direction was described as attractive, long hair, a little shallow, owns a nightclub. And we knew he worked out a lot, so we kind of just gave him gym attire, because we were like, that's what people who work out wear. Please exercise, it's very healthy. But the problem with this is that it really gave the impression that his primary character trait was going to the gym. And maybe that's not very fashionable, especially if he owns a nightclub and kind of cares about that stuff. So we revised it to be more in line with how we wanted the player to feel when they first met him, right? Like how you feel when you first meet like the gym Sunder versus shirtless leather jacket Sunder is, something different. We think the leather jacket Sunder is more brazenly flirty, he's confident and he's interested in you, and we think the new design is more effective at communicating that. So another game that kind of uses fashion as like an anchor is Monster Prom. So I know they're two dating games, but they're the two people that, one is our game, Monster Prom. Dev let me talk about his game, so thank you very much. But cheers to them for sharing their design info with me. Monster Prom has wild humor and a fantasy monster theme, obviously, which is great, but their problem was that they still wanted it to feel grounded and real and close to young, millennial, everyday life. So how they did that was through fashion. It became their thematic anchor to really ground people to the theme. And when you need to find style inspiration, where can you go? It's easy. There's a whole bunch of people out there showing their personal style, whether it's on Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, Lookbook, etc. And you can improve, right? So the Monster Prom team realized the three girls were always wearing shorts or skirts or dresses, so it seemed like it was a bit limited in their fashion design. So they challenged themselves to research good DLC outfits, and that's kind of how we got into this. And there's other ways that you can do this, right? I highly recommend one day just looking at fashion shows. It's great. They play around with themes. There's a treasure trove of inspirations. Pay attention and be curious about what certain clothes make the news, wonder what you can do about the world of self-expression, personality, and culture, and find new ways to celebrate art. And of course, another way you can learn to integrate fashion to games is hire more diverse developers. A more diverse team means more diverse options, ideas, and interests, which in turn attracts a more diverse audience. So, again, overall to me, fashion is excitement found through exploration and self-discovery. It finds power in aesthetic appeal and fantasy, and it's a whole new style of play worth doing well. Thanks. Cool. I don't know how much time we have for. We have 5 minutes for questions. Please go to the mic and ask questions if you have them. If not, I will be here. Sorry if that was not a normal photo. No questions? If you're shy, it's okay. I will be here, hanging out. Oh, is that? Hello.
Hello, I have a question.
Yes.
I was wondering what you think a good idea would be for starting fashion games right as far as body image goes, because obviously in the world of high fashion that is a lot of the place we could take inspiration from, it's dominated by a certain body type, and I was just wondering sort of what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of fashion designers now who have started to embrace like more full-bodied figures, I suppose. And there, again, I would highly suggest looking on lookbook.nu and Instagram, and there's so many fashion bloggers out there who just embrace like, whatever body type they have and don't fit whatever like runway fashion, and you can learn a lot from them, and they are fantastic. I admire them.
Thank you.
Which is a better, hiring a fashion advisor or designer running a fashion?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So which is better? So one option is hiring a fashion
Designer?
teacher.
Okay, yeah.
Or designer learning about fashion.
Or game designer learning fashion.
Yeah.
Oh, a game designer learning about fashion?
Learning about fashion.
Should you hire a fashion director or a game designer learn the fashion?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, honestly, to be completely honest with you, I don't know, because there's not enough games out there who have kind of maybe tried doing that. I think anyone can get into fashion or just dress or like learn about it if they're interested in it. So if you have someone who's interested in it and wants to learn more about it, I would say go with the game designer who's interested in fashion.
Thank you.
Which roles on the team would you normally think would need this expertise? Like, is it artists, character designers, everybody?
I mean, not everybody, but that'd be cool if they did. I think what usually I've seen is important is that our art director is quite interested in it, the creative director, the creative lead, and maybe this depends on each team because for Kitfox we're quite small, so it's really easy for us to communicate. And for me personally, like I'm not technically a character designer, but I love fashion, so I'll look and I'll say how I feel about it. But I would say probably at least the art director and the creative director.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You mentioned Overwatch, and which is well known for its monetization being around skins. And do you think the monetization of skins and of fashion limits the players' ability to express themselves? Do you want to see less of that?
I mean, personally, I would like to see less of that. I just like customizing my character however I want. But there's so many layers to making money and profits and other things like that. Sorry, not a great answer. But anyways, personally, I think it does kind of limit it. It gives you it gives you that rush, it gives you that excitement, but I kind of just wish that we didn't have loot boxes for customization. But that's a whole other thing that I can't do. But thank you.
Hi there.
Hi.
Something that I was curious to hear your thoughts on is something that we see a lot in games is future worlds being imagined, and some of them result in really interesting and unique fashions, like with things like Deus Ex and Detroit Become Human, and others often not so much. And I was curious on your thoughts on basically imagining future fashion and how to address that.
Yeah, so there's so much about fashion is drawing inspiration from different things. Like Deus Ex looked gorgeous because it almost looks like an Alexander McQueen runway. And there's fashion designers out there who basically create clothes that look super futuristic and kind of make worlds on their own with their clothes. I would personally say if you're trying to create like a futuristic world and you're not really sure how you want it to look, one, it's okay to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. But two, just find those like fashion designers, find the inspirations, find inspiration in anything really that you can look around in. But yeah, I think that's probably why. I personally feel like when I saw the Deus Ex clothes in particular, that it was just perfect. So do your research, I would say.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi. How do you feel about the sort of balance between customization and immersion when it comes to creating worlds that have a specific look? And more importantly, showing gameplay through clothing. Like, does late game armor need to look like late game armor, or do you think that customization should be more important?
So, I mean, it really depends. So part of it is that I think it depends on the kind of game you want, obviously, but I don't think it needs to really look like late game armor if your game is basically, so let me try to frame this better. So if your game is like, it's the end of the world, and now your late game armor is like you looking all badass, shooting stuff, I don't know, then maybe that is what you want, and you want to be able to customize it so that the player themselves feels like they're at their most powerful. I think that would be really important, and I've seen a lot of games like do immersion and customization together like really well, and you would probably want to look into that. I can't really think of games now, but I'm gonna think about it and get back to you. Sorry, I'm gonna think about this. But yeah, sorry, thanks. What is it? Hi.
I live in Japan, and some of the games you show are from Japanese companies like Persona, Xenoblade, and so on. And in Japan, yeah, we've got those games, and there's the cosplay scenes, and people go to cosplay shop, and that's a huge thing. And they go to anime convention, and they buy some goodies. So it's not just about games, but about like a whole ecosystem. And there's the Lolita, everything. And I would like to know what was the situation in North America. Is it just about like fashion in games? Or is fashion also some things that could build some bridges and links between, I don't know, comics, anime, manga, everything,
So just to repeat your question, you're just asking if fashion can be a bridge between...
Yeah, like cosplay or, I don't know, anime, not just games, but like the whole ecosystem.
Yeah. I think fashion is something offline and online, right? Like that's why we love the merch. That's why we love the T-shirts. That's why we love dressing, like cosplaying and all that. So I think it can bridge understanding or just interests between people.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi. I was wondering how you felt about certain pieces of clothing or armor being like attributed with stat boosts and how that affects the gameplay, like how cuter clothes might have less effective defensive options, and how uglier ones have more effective defensive options.
I've been in that boat before. Honestly, I don't want to say it's bad because I can see interesting things coming from it. But maybe like in Diablo that I've played, like you can customize how you want your clothes to look, Diablo 3 anyway. You can customize how your clothes looks even when you get the drops. I think that it's difficult, but I don't mind stats being attributed to clothes if that's important to you or if that's how you want to try to like make your game. But I would love to still be able to customize it, again, because I think how the player feels in those clothes is really important.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. We do have the breakout space across the hall if you would like to continue the conversation.
Thanks.
Thanks.